You are welcome to pose any questions you have to the presenters.
I would like to know how did you get the ethical clearance? Because in your study you use nursery students. So how did you get the ethical clearance to observe them throughout their learning process?
Because before I start the intervention, I took the consent of the parents and also the consent of the preschool to conduct the intervention.
Thank you.
I have mentioned that in my intervention slide.
No questions?
My question goes to Ms. Hetiheba. Now you mentioned that the older teachers and male teachers are more domineering and they are more sort of rigid and they are not interactive. That was the implication. And the younger teachers are not so. And I thought that it was an assumption rather than a research finding. Isn't that so?
I'm sorry, sir, that if you felt that I was implying that older teachers and male teachers were more dominating and all. It's not that, and it's not exactly an assumption. And because I found a negative correlation with the teaching styles and age, indicating that older teachers preferred a more teacher-centered approach. It's not that they prefer dominating over the students and like they're not friendly. It's just that they preferred preferred giving a lecture or giving instructions rather than getting the ideas from the students and giving them the opportunity to have their own feedback. They just preferred giving a lecture and having the main role in the class, I guess.
Okay. Now, may I know whether you have gathered information from the students concerned?
No, I didn't gather information from the students. It was just from the teachers.
So don't you think that it is a requirement to gather information from students as well?
I think it could be recommended if I am just furthering my study. I could try and do that with students.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Again,
Yeah. So how do you sort of implement a student-centered learning scheme? Is it based on just classroom teaching or explaining things to the children or anything of that sort, or is there any other strategy to implement a student-centered learning scheme within a school system?
I think, sir, that we can use discussions, we can use group discussions, we can use activities where hands-on activities where students are just given a problem and they can identify the answer by themselves rather than giving them the question and after 5 minutes just giving them the answer. We can just give them the question. I know it takes a while and with our resources it's difficult, but if we want a student-centered approach in teaching, I believe that it's the way to go.
Thank you very much for your sort of understanding of some idea about student-centered learning, but it is basically the students actually do most of the findings and most of the project work. I mean, we actually introduce mini projects, instead of just imparting bits and pieces of knowledge from a podium. So now in that as Mr. Kitsiri mentioned, age and then gender and all these criteria, are they sort of so imperative in a thing like that? If a project is sort of introduced to a group of students and they are assigned to carry out the project, and in your sort of counseling, is it? It's counseling or mentoring, yeah, in a process like that, I think anybody can do it. I mean, if he has properly conceptualized the process.
I think, Professor, her concern is like within the classroom, whether it is a student-centered classroom or a teacher-centered classroom. I think her perspective was that. That was the problem.
Yeah, there are also actually now teacher has to do a lot of desk work before going to the classroom, you know. Otherwise the text is there, the materials and facts and figures and all those things are there. But the thing is to get them digested on by the students, we have to actually introduce that scheme of work. Like it can be inside or outside the classroom. Yeah? Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions to the other presenters?
My question goes to the second speaker, who's sitting in the third position. Now, when you're discussing about in your presentation, you said the parents, most of the parents were only qualified in advanced level. Now, this is more like what I'm saying is more like my perspective. Now, even if we take parents of our generation, they are more like they most of their highest educational qualification is advanced level. I believe it's because of the status or the society or the education system that prevailed while they were studying, and they had more job opportunities even for these advanced level results. But in 20 or 30 years time, our children would say, now our parents are degree holders and postgraduates or something like that. And do you believe now parents being only qualified in advanced level have a rather high influence in selecting the institutes that the children who are gonna study, do their high education? But what is your perspective on that? I mean, the influence of the parents. No, but yes, selecting the institute. Do you believe that there is parents being only qualified in advanced level? Does it have, in your perspective, does it have any influence over when selecting the institute that their children gonna do their high education?
The education level of the parents.
Yeah, education level of the parents.
Education level here, the education level of the parents, it is affected to that means they are influencing to the students to the higher education. It is the education level of the parents. But when they are selecting the institutes, it is not the significant factor. The education level of the parents. Selecting higher education, influencing the students to do the higher education, it is a significant factor. But when they are selecting the institute, it is not a significant factor.
And to the final speaker, it is again, I had the same question that Kitsiri sir asked, and also, what is your perspective, ma'am? If you did your research basing on students' perspective, what do you think? Now that you have interacted with the teachers, they might have said something about the the students' perspectives as well.
Well, it can be, it's sort of a controversial issue because that as students, when I was a student, I really liked when teachers gave all the answers and if we didn't have any projects to do by ourselves, I really loved that.
And add to that, madam, do you think our educational system is up to the standard where the student-centered educational system to be implemented?
I know that we have less resources, but I think the resources question comes a little bit later. In my perspective, I feel that the knowledge is the thing that's lacking. Because if the students know that if they get better retention, if they do it by themselves, if they get the experience that they can retain better, if they do it themselves, then they retain better. If they get that experience, I think that they'll be interested in doing and maybe moving on to student-centered learning rather than just waiting for the teachers to do everything. Like actually, that's what we did, and I know it's difficult, and so the students and the teachers, everyone has to contribute, and I think it can be done. Thank you.
Good evening. I have two questions. One for the last presentation. Now, you have used chi-squared for the analysis, right?
Yes.
Chi-squared test.
Yes.
And at the same time, I saw you said there were only 9 who used the student-centered
Yes.
approach. I think the sample size is not that big to use the chi-squared, but if you can use at least more than 15 in each cell, your conclusions are more valid. Probably.
Yeah, that's what I told in my presentation, that it can't be really generalizable. So my findings, you can't really go by my findings with that small sample. But the previous studies with larger samples and large populations have found similar results.
Right. And how many schools you have used for this study?
I used 25 schools.
25 schools, no? And the sample size is 250.
The target sample was 250, but I was just able to obtain 176.
176.
Yes.
But if you can increase the sample size, probably you get better.
Yeah.
You know why? If the sample size is small, there can be a lot of other errors occur, not because of the study. This is my personal idea. And this is another one for the analysis of significant factors considered in, this is Miss Vaidyasekara. Even in your case, you made a study about a private sector institution, no, offering the degrees, undergraduates. Then is it only for the Colombo district or even the other districts? Only Colombo district, no? Is it mentioned in your paper? Is it in Colombo district? No, it is only the Colombo district, no?
Situated in the Colombo district, that's why I have selected it. But actually, mainly I focus the Colombo district institutes.
Roughly how many students are there in these private sector institutions in Colombo?
Total number.
No, just I want to know whether your sample size is somewhat, because I'm really concerned about the sample size, because it matters. You should be a good representative of the entire population. Otherwise, the conclusions are, subject to some problems, I think. So there are 250, no, altogether?
Yes, altogether 250.
Right. So if you can get little idea about how many students are studying in these institutions, and if you can get for different levels like first year, second year, third year, then like different levels of each factor. Right. I think Mr. Kure can help you to get it done. Right. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks.
In your study about the student-centered teaching, what were the criteria that you used to identify student-centered approach of teachers? Next, the other one is like, in your sample, were there any teachers who had postgraduate qualifications?
I didn't really check the teachers' educational qualifications, because that would have been a different research question and different research objective. And about the other question, the student-centered and teacher-centered groups were selected from the scores of the questionnaire. There were 44 items, and each item was marked according to, it was either a negative item or a positive item, and each item contained negative marks and positive marks. So from those questionnaires, the questionnaire has given a cutoff value. That was the criteria for the student-centered and teacher-centered approaches.
Postgraduate qualification, because I think that is a very good thing to consider when you are doing a study on the teaching styles, because now we normally teachers get their postgraduate qualifications, and per annum I think nearly more than 1,000 teachers qualified, they get their postgraduate qualifications. Because I know, because I am from that area, and I'm because Columbia University or USL, Peradini and NIE, they have this. So I know that in our program we have more than 3,000 teachers for our program. So in our program, what we focus on the student-centered teaching, that was implemented in 1972 reforms. So from 1972 we have been promoting this student-centered approach. So my concern is in your study, why these teachers, because they must have the postgraduate qualifications, and also we have 5E method. So they implement the 5E method in the classroom, which is basically on the student-centered approach. So my concern is like, if the teachers do not use the student-centered approach, what's the point of is in our education system, what the point of having postgraduate diplomas and emphasizing them on this such of student-centered approach? That, and in my personally, we observe teachers in the school, so we have identified that even the elder teachers, but I'm not, this is my personal experience, that they use student-centered approach. So that is what my perspective on your study, because we were in that field, so that was I was thinking about. Didn't you check the postgraduate qualification?
No, I didn't check the qualifications.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for attending this session. And thank you very much, presenters and members of the audience. I think now it is time for awarding the certificates.